Welcome to the Rogue Health Economist, episode 16. And I'm super excited today because it is Chronic Disease Week, and we are going to be talking about reversing cognitive decline. And when we talk about cognitive decline, you may be familiar with diseases like Alzheimer's. We're going to get into that all today. I'm super excited to have my friend here. His name's Seth Conger. He's the founder of MIOS Health. And we've known each other for a few years, but Seth, welcome to the Rogue Health Economist. As a Rogue Health Economist yourself, I guess.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I just snuck that one in there and let you know my degree's in economics.
So let's talk about Alzheimer's, and I guess the first question I have for you, who are you as a non-doctor to be talking about reversing Alzheimer's and reversing my cognitive decline?
So, the funny thing about my degree, I have a degree in economics was because I was told by the dean of students in college that I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. And that came after multiple head injuries in high school that took me off that path down the pre-med track. So it's really interesting that economics and business ended up bringing me around to functional medicine. And there I found a solution to my brain health. So I was actually patient number one for what I've created, figuring out how to put a plan in place, a comprehensive plan with lifestyle and supplements and multiple different practitioners and technologies and everything to increase my own cognitive ability. I have some really cool data that shows that my processing speed, which is like the overall speed of your brain, was in the 20th percentile for a 30-year-old. And by the time I was 32, I was in the 99th percentile for that same age group, just from everything I had done. But what I realized on that journey was I had to do all the work. I had to go out and find the different practitioners, and I had to spend all this money on different products, and some things worked and some things didn't. And it was horribly complicated. And that's really hard for somebody whose brain isn't working that well. But eventually I broke through, and once you kind of break that ceiling and get across that road, you can start making better decisions about your own health and your own life, and then you continue to improve. And the light bulb went off that's what 50 plus million Americans are dealing with on a daily basis. They're dealing with that level of cognitive decline where they can't make those appropriate decisions. They don't know where to help. They don't know who to have as a guide. And so what we decided to do is bridge the gap between the expertise of the doctors and the amazing practitioners and the technology and those wonderful products that are out there, and bring it all under one roof so that people could get that level of care.
Absolutely. So, when we first met, you were working in a clinic, right? That was reversing cognitive decline. So, what was going on there? What did you learn in that clinic? And what have you brought from that experience to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so the clinic was Carolina Healthspan Institute in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was my father-in-law's practice. And he's a brilliant physician. Gave me a ton of just opening to try to figure things out. And I ended up becoming a neurofeedback clinician while I was there. It was one of the services we were offering. And we were working with lots of people with all sorts of different levels from varying underlying conditions of cognitive difficulties. And we started to build a team over time. We had nurse practitioners, we had therapists, we had health coaches, and we kept building and building. And what I realized eventually at the end of it was that, it wasn't an expertise problem. It was an operations problem. It was an implementation problem. And so through that, we had done some studies. We did some studies with former NFL players and Hall of Fame guys. And there was a huge difference in how people were improving. And the only difference between the 80 odd guys that we worked with, of the guys who improved rapidly and stayed better, and the ones who didn't, was their lifestyle. The ones who had purpose, the drive and the motivation, that were eating a little bit better, maybe taking a few supplements like as simple as a fish oil pill. The ones who had a partner who was really supportive and still got together with their community and other friends. Those were the ones, and they were exercising, that were getting better, faster, and sustainable. And the ones who had terrible diets, who were eating fast food, who were constantly depressed, who were divorced from their wives, they were not getting better, no matter what we were throwing at them for specialty treatments. And of course, at that point, being a neurofeedback specialist, that was my hammer, right? So every brain I saw looked like a nail. And I thought, well, why don't we throw this fancy neurofeedback at everybody and go through 20 to 60 sessions of it and see if we can change the physiological patterns. And I slowly started realizing this is too far downstream. It's a whole lot better than a medication, right? Trying to change the neurotransmitters, but it's nowhere close to the fundamentals that we must be doing. And we moved on from working with those football players with head injuries to working with individuals with subjective cognitive decline and mild cognitive impairment, and even some people who had been diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And we found a very interesting model. See, we were using a lot of education that Dr. Brown, my father-in-law, had, an expertise in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and supplements and the lifestyle portion. And then we were also partnering with Dale Bredesen, who wrote The End of Alzheimer's, and using his work and his expertise and the learnings that had come from all the different underlying conditions that can drive the disease. But what we figured out is eventually it's a compliance problem. So if the client can't be compliant, if things are too complicated for them, if they can't follow the instructions on a day-to-day basis, or you make it too hard, they can't follow through and they're not going to get better. And when you're dealing with somebody in mild cognitive impairment, and we'll get into the structures of this disease process a little bit later, but when you're dealing with somebody who's right on that edge before dementia, they have a hard time following those instructions. And if you're not guiding them along the way, they're not going to get there. And so when I left Carolina HealthSpan, the practice actually sold. And so it was a perfect opportunity for me to go out and create my own thing. And we've pivoted a couple times since, but the heart of what we wanted to do was change the economics of how we do business and health, and put the client, the patient, the individual with the cognitive difficulties at the center, put them at the center and build a team around them, build a team and make sure they have a personalized program, and then make sure they have a very well-defined goal that they need to get to, and then guarantee the result.
I think you saw the same thing that I saw in the functional medicine community, is like incredible wisdom, insight, for Dr. Bredesen to create a protocol that could help identify, what are the root causes in these, people that have the same kind of conditions, all of that learning. And then just realizing like the success rate in your average outpatient clinic, where it's like, hey, come on in, oh, you've got this, go do this, and giving them a complicated protocol was not working as well as it should work, given how awesome the science is. Right. And ultimately, these are conversations that, we've had over time to think about how do we actually facilitate real transformation in people. And I salute you, obviously, going through it. So tell us a little bit about, sort of what you've come up with and how it works for people and who's a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me start with the last question of who's a good fit. So there's a timeline of progression with cognitive decline. And you just had Tom O'Brien, who's one of our advisors, on just a couple of days ago, and he talked about this timeline being 20 or 30 years, and it goes from having no symptoms, which we call preclinical Alzheimer's disease, and that means you have some risk factors, right? You may have some genetics weighing against you, you may have a family history, you may have an underlying condition or two that have been shown to increase your risk. And from there, you move into subjective cognitive decline. That means you're having some memory issues and other cognitive issues, but no one else can really tell. And if you went into your doctor's office and you did the old pen and paper test where you draw a clock and name some animals, you'd be totally cognitively normal, right? So then you progress to mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment means you have a problem. Everybody else knows you have a problem. And now that traditional testing also can show that you have a problem. So at that point, you can get a label and they can bill a code. And then they tell you to, come back and we'll monitor and manage this disease process. And that whole grouping we call pre-Alzheimer's. That's over 50 million people conservatively in the United States alone. Over 50 million people in those categories. So to make it a little bit more simple, The first category is, where did I put my keys? Oh yeah, they're in my coat pocket. That's preclinical Alzheimer's disease. Once you get to subjective, it's, where did I put my keys? Oh, they're not in my coat pocket. They're not on the key rack. Let me retrace my steps. Oh yeah, they're on the table over here. Once you get to mild cognitive impairment, you hear the, honey, why are your keys in the refrigerator? And finally, once you get to Alzheimer's, it's, what are keys for?
Yeah.
And we work with people in the pre-Alzheimer's category, that 50 million. So as long as you're independently living and you can still follow instructions, we can see improvement. And I helped co-author a paper, Dale Bredesen's latest work that he published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease and Parkinsonism in 2018. There was 100 cases of different levels of pre-Alzheimer's that saw improvement in their brain function and overall health. And we helped contribute to those cases. And what that showed was that it is possible. And research since then, even more detailed clinical research out of Weill Cornell University with Richard Isaacson, has shown in significant rigor that this idea of precision medicine that is personalized, plus personalized lifestyle programs, can absolutely reverse cognitive decline and prevent Alzheimer's disease and increase brain function. And so those are the people that we work with. And we have a pretty cool system that we've developed because we want to make sure that we're working with the right people, that those people are motivated, that they have the means, and that they have the right goals in order to get to. So we start every conversation out with just a discovery, finding out and clarifying for that individual where they stand and what may be going on, what may be driving that decline for them in the first place. And then we measure, because what you can measure, you can manage. So we've created what we call the cognitive baseline, which is a set of objective cognitive tests, validated subjective questionnaires, and lifestyle questionnaires that you and your partner do. We map everything together, and that shows us exactly how you compare to others your age group without any cognitive symptoms. And it breaks it down into really cool categories. So instead of focusing on just memory, which is the symptom that we can all feel, right? I'm just missing these words and I'm forgetting my keys and all that. Memory is way downstream. Upstream from that is things like decision-making and planning and organization and attention and comprehension and speed of your brain. Those are the upstream objective functions that we want to measure to see a pattern of if you're really declining or if this is normal cognitive aging. And so we find out the baseline, and from there we develop a personalized program. We have functional medicine doctors that we work with. We have health coaches that we work with. We have exercise physiologists and nutritionists that are all part of a team built around a technology platform that we have that measures your progress, not just cognitively, but every single person gets an Oura ring and everybody gets a smart scale. They all get continuous glucose monitors. And we get to see those micro improvements over time, deliver the education and activities on a daily basis, and guide these individuals through a 6-month program until they get to the result that they want.
Amazing. Yeah, look, I want to dive deep into that. And I guess the first question I have is, like, for your own experience, right? When you were experiencing your own issues that led to all of this, like, one of the things that we've come to learn at through the time, and then what we're doing here at Find Functional, is realizing that at a certain point, you had to take the locus of control back from the medical system and be in charge yourself, and realize, like, you were going to actually start to kick these kind of things in. And I think that that shift is one of the hardest things for people to do, and especially for people who are suffering with these kind of symptoms, because it's not a natural thing, and we've been in this sort of like patriarchal system for 150 years where there's someone to take care of you. That was created in a time of trauma and infection that was probably reasonable at that point, but is not reasonable for these kind of diseases. So how did you wrestle back that that control, and how do you help people in your group wrestle back that control?
Well, I think with me, it was a mix of just intervention and frustration. So I was frustrated with my lack of brain function that I had before, but I had been told over and over by psychologists, my primary care provider, multiple primary care providers, and neurologists that nothing was wrong. Right? I was told that all my test results were within the normal range. I was told that I was homesick. I was told that I was just, big fish in a little pond back in the small town that I grew up in. So I was pretty convinced for over a decade that what I was dealing with was just what I had to live with, until I actually did a functional brain test. So it was showing me objectively what was going on. That was the shock, where I said, this isn't right. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. And I realized that in one key area, executive function, which is the CEO of your brain behind your frontal lobes, was so low that I wasn't even making good decisions about what I thought my brain function was like. So it was amazing to see that. And, that allowed me to understand that nobody else was going to be in control of my health and my destiny rather than myself. And I had to do something about it. And I think I realized at the same time too, I asked the question, why, with insurance. And I'd been using my insurance to go to these doctors. I'd been using my insurance to do everything. And I had believed at that point that the medical system was there to keep me healthy. And I asked the question, I said, why do I have insurance? Why do I have automobile insurance and renter's insurance and life insurance? It's for disaster. I wasn't going to use my automobile insurance to go get an oil change. That wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to use my, life insurance other than if I died by accident. So why was I thinking that medical insurance was something different? And then I started digging in and I realized that we have an acute care system, but we're using 90+% of the dollars for chronic disease management in an acute care system. So I realized that the system wasn't built for it. And if it wasn't built for it, then I needed to be okay with the fact that I'm paying insurance premiums in case I get hit by a truck. And then I'll be really happy that I'm in the United States and we have incredible surgery centers. But everything outside of that, I realized I had to be in control of. And the moment I realized I needed to be in control, and this is the point where we try to get people to, we get them to understand that they are in control of their health, not the insurance company. It's not built, the insurance company and medical system is not built to keep you healthy. You have to invest in your own health. And it's just like financial investing, right? If you start when you're 20 and you put away a couple $100s a month, every month, by the time you're 65, you're good to go unless you retired in, February 1st of 2020. But outside of that, it's compounding interest. And if you wait until you're 62 and then you start putting money away, you have no chance of retiring at 65.
Yeah.
Well, with health, it's the exact same thing. You have to invest in your health over time. Now, there's a couple differences. One, we make regular withdrawals to our health accounts, right? Every single time you do something that negatively impacts your health and your brain function, you are withdrawing from that investment account. But you can also very quickly build that back up. If you take a targeted, personalized approach, or if you get in the right group setting with the right coach, you can very easily build that nest egg of your health back up. And I can promise you that your brain health, it's your most important investment you've ever made in your entire life. I mean, your brain is the accumulation of every skill you have, every relationship you have, every memory you have. And if you're not investing in it, you may be putting yourself at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about this from a financial point of view, because ultimately, this is the Rogue Health Economist podcast. The sort of thesis has been, that the cost of chronic disease is going to bankrupt every country, and we need to have a structure that facilitates self-efficacy, right? Getting people out of a system where everything costs. What are the costs of Alzheimer's? What are the costs of these brain diseases? What are sort of some of these externalities, right? What are external costs that aren't just the Alzheimer's, but are taxing society? And why do you feel like the work that you're doing in bringing this together has a strong economic footing?
So we'll stick with the U.S. stats because they're a little bit easier to handle and actually comprehend. So right now, Alzheimer's disease is a $280 billion a year problem. $280 billion a year, and that does not count unpaid caregiver time and costs. So once you hit age 65, you have a 1 in 9 chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. Once you hit 85, you have a 1 in 3 chance of dying with Alzheimer's disease or another related form of dementia. And a per person cost for Alzheimer's disease averages $365,000. There's incredible stats on the Alzheimer's Association. They're really, really good at putting out the information of what the disease costs and making awareness. Unfortunately, no one's working on a solution. You know, we've spent $65 billion over the last 2 decades searching after a drug to clear away amyloid. $65 billion working on something that is so downstream that has failed 99.6% of the time, rather than looking upstream of what is causing the brain to produce too much amyloid in the first place, or what is causing the brain to not clear away the amyloid as it naturally should be. And these are
causing it. What is
causing it?
Yeah.
So there are a number of factors, and basically Alzheimer's disease, and again, not a doctor, this is not medical advice, but this is coming from the research that is clear and compelling out there from multiple different sources. So Alzheimer's disease is the long-term result of your brain's reaction. And in many cases, it's an innate immune response to a unique combination of things. And those things could be nutrient deficiencies. It could be hypertension, it could be type 2 diabetes, could be inflammation and infections or heart disease, sleep disorders, traumatic brain injuries, stress, lack of challenge or purpose, not having community, poor nutrition. There's upwards of about 50 different things that we know that can point the brain towards producing too much amyloid plaque. I'm not saying that that is the problem, but the buildup of that creates an interference in communication in the brain. And that's why people say, well, wait a second, I knew that word, it was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't get it. And I remembered it, you know, a few days later or a few hours later. It's like the station's there and the train goes right by. And then when it passes again, you remember it and you can see that train station, you stop. And that's because of an interference in the synapses. So what we're dealing with here is an imbalance and an immune reaction where the brain's actually trying to protect itself against things that are not good for it. And, you know, there's a lot of different underlying mechanisms of action. A great paper just came out about a week and a half ago in Nature, arguably the most well-respected and biggest journal in the entire world. And it was talking about the blood-brain barrier and the mechanism of action of the blood-brain barrier breaking down, especially in people who have a genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's disease, and what happens there when things that shouldn't be getting in the brain are getting into the brain, like toxins. And it's, you know, I think the problem is you say something like toxins and Alzheimer's disease, and people jump all over you and say toxins don't cause Alzheimer's disease. And you know what? It's a combination of these things. It is a multi-causal disease process. And the fact that we're focusing on this one cause disease, one treatment, is just never going to work with a complex chronic disease. So we need to go back upstream and think about what can we do to, you know, stop this flood before it starts.
Absolutely. Yeah, such a good point. And I feel like, you know, ultimately, I think, you know, I guess one of the things I'm excited about is, as, you know, part of being a rogue health economist is one is thinking differently, right? Yeah. No one in Alzheimer's is thinking about reversing it, but like ultimately you've done it, you're doing it, and now you're doing it at scale with MIOS Health. But then the next thing is like, the best, you know, the thing that's rogue is not just talking about it, not just making journal articles about it, but actually like setting up structures that can execute. And I see that, you know, with what we're doing at Find Functional, our goal is really to like help people go as far as they can for the minimum possible cost. Yeah. And ultimately, I know that we can reverse some mild cognitive impairment in, you know, with our health coaches and our, you know, online groups. But as soon as it's a point where you need to go through extensive testing and find that specific root cause, you need a team that is going to include a doctor to do the testing, to, you know, understand what's going on in the test, to work out what the right tests are. And ultimately, I'm super excited to be partnering with you so that we know, look, if brain diseases come along, we can, you know, push them to a team where we know that the results are going to be if anything, tracked, right? Yeah. Where we're going to be able to see. And tell us a little bit about how you're tracking that, because this has been like my pet peeve for 15 years of being in this industry is that most functional medicine practices are this kind of black box when no one knows what happens. And part of what we're doing here at Find Functional is a way to be able to determine, like, if I send someone to this doctor, we're going to keep track and see what happens, and we're going to know who the best doctors are. And ultimately, I know that you're passionate about proving that this medicine works. So tell us what you're doing to track the outcomes of the people you work with.
So James, what you said is right on, right? With a health coach, with group classes, with curated education, you absolutely can make a huge dent, and you can take people with significant symptoms and you can absolutely move them along to a totally different trajectory. When they get to that point where they really need to invest in their health, then they should have a different deal. It's our belief that you should be paying for results, not paying for stuff, not paying for codes, not paying for labels, paying for results. It's how every other business in the world works. And if you're going to invest your money and it's not going to be covered by insurance, then you should believe that you're going to get out of it what you want to get out of it, as long as you're willing to put in the work. So that's the deal that we make. We take a cognitive baseline from somebody, we develop realistic goals of where they can get in 6 months, and then we give them everything they need to get there. And if they're going to invest their time, effort, and money, then we're going to guarantee that they're going to hit those goals in 6 months. And if they don't, we keep working with them for another 6 months until they get there at no additional cost. And at 12 months, if we haven't gotten them to those goals, then we refund the entire program fee that they paid us. And we learn from it. And we learn from that, and we put the data back in the system. And we understand that the next person who comes along with those markers, we need to change the way that we work with that person. And then we report that. We report those cases so that everybody learns. We're creating a data compository of all this really rich data from wearables and from biomarkers and from imaging and from subjective symptoms and from progression tracks. And we've had to build from scratch a technology system that would actually handle all of this, measure it all, and take things like, our original assessment for somebody with MCI uses 9 different laboratories. You take 9 different laboratories and 1,000 biomarkers, you end up with 300 pages of PDF paper on your table lying around, with every single one of them comes with a different range for a different biomarker. There's overlapped biomarkers in them. They come in at different times. Doctors shouldn't be spending their time in operations. So we built the technology to take all of that, merge it together, put it on one platform, build it out by system, and start making some inferences. And we're running that through algorithms to start learn a little bit more as we get more clients in. And it's going to make the job easier for the doctors, so the doctors can be doctors and the health coaches can be health coaches, and they can work as a team around the results for the clients.
What data points have you found already that come from 2 different tests that, when put together on one page, give an insight that would have been impossible to get if you hadn't have done that process?
Looking at the differences between amino acids and cognitive function. I mean, we can see changes in amino acid profiles and executive function and attention and processing speed, and we're getting enough data so that we can map those things together. And it's just amazing to see that. Looking at that and taking it another level and looking at your sleep data from an Oura Ring. Looking at your Oura Ring and seeing improvements of your overall quality and quantity of sleep and your sleep efficiency, and then watching your executive function and your overall processing speed shift up. Those are things that nobody would go and do a cognitive test, and you can't do that with a pen and paper mocha and then try to track that out against a smart ring or a Fitbit. So we're having all this really cool, rich data that we're going to be able to produce. And once we have enough numbers of that, I think it's going to be really valuable for the entire community. And at the same time, we're holding some hands to the fire and saying, we want to make sure that the data that we're getting is extremely clean, because there's this whole process behind the scenes about data collection too, and how it's collected and when it's collected. And there's a massive process in there that needs to be done the right way. And we're making sure that everything is being done the right way along the way, so that we get the best data and we can give that back to the field. We can all learn from it on the difficult cases, and then turn that around into something that's just going to benefit not only the field, but everybody who has cognitive impairments, who wants to get better, faster, more efficiently, and know that there's a really good goal in the end in sight.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Let me give you a contention that I have, and you tell me whether you agree. I already know that
Yeah.
you do agree, but I wanted to be out there. My contention is that once everyone in the world has a way to measure their function,
Yeah.
now functional medicine will just become medicine.
So I agree to a point. I think that I think there is still a motivational factor in here and a coaching factor. Willpower is not enough in many cases, and people just don't go and do things on their own just because they see a data point. I see this all the time, and it's really interesting. We're still under lockdown as we're recording this. We have been for a couple months now, and I've talked to about 50 people this week who have cognitive issues and concerns. And a lot of the more clear-headed ones are saying, it's been getting worse over the last 2 months. And the first answer I had was, well, it's because we have this stress, right, of COVID-19 and all the stuff going on, and this energy in the world that is about uncertainty and bringing everything down. And that may be enough to tip that water over the bathtub of your symptoms. And then I started listening deeper and realizing what people were really saying was, the world has slowed down enough, and I've slowed down enough where finally, for the first time in my life, I've paused. And I can actually look into my own body and my own brain and feel what is going on and understand what is happening with myself. And I know now that something is off and I got to do something about it. Because before this happened, I was just on to the next thing and on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And if something happened in my brain, I would dismiss it and say, oh, I have an excuse for that. And I have a list of excuses for that. But now they're starting to realize that something is changing in their minds and they want to do something about it. When we show them how that looks on paper, objectively, it's shocking. But they understand they need to do something about it. But still, if I was just to give them that paper and then a whole bunch of education and say, here you go. And we do that. We have a scholarship program for people who truly can't afford our services. We deliver about a 130-page packet of information that they can do on their own. And guess what? Without the coaching and the guidance or the group support, like you're doing, they don't make it very far. Even with the measurement that shows them that they must do something. So I think that there's another element to this. I think the measurement is one piece, but I think there has to be community. And I think there has to be coaching and guidance from an external force that's not your spouse or your child, that is going to help push you forward. And we see this in so many other different areas. You've talked about this. I mean, you talk about this every single week, right? I think those two things are the key.
Absolutely. Well, look, dude, I really appreciate you coming to be part of it. I'm super excited about the journey that you guys are going on right now. I'm excited that, at this exact moment, that people can access this kind of care, even though many functional medicine clinics are furloughed, even though, the whole of medicine doesn't know that this is possible. And I'm just super excited for what you're going to do for the people that need it, and then what you're going to do for the people that come after, and what we're going to learn from this for future generations. Because I'm really committed to that, is that building the data set, building the proof that this needs to be the way that medicine should go for chronic disease. And I'm super excited to announce today that, that we at Find Functional are going to be partnering with MIOS Health for, cognitive decline, because we see the same thing happening, which is essentially that this is a particularly difficult condition to treat in an outpatient kind of scenario. And we need the right combination of team, and the fact that it's all digital, is the right situation. So thanks so much for being here as part of the Rogue Health Economist. And I guess I just want to offer you any parting words about MIOS, about the future, and anything else you want to share.
Well, thanks, James. I really want to throw it back to you with a debt of gratitude for what you have created and continue to create. I think, coming after your last book and then creating and working with Find Functional to bridge this gap for the people who are desperately seeking the right level of care and the right starting point, and to work on those fundamentals, right? You shouldn't be learning how to shoot 3-pointers better than anybody else before you learn how to tie your shoes, and then how you learn how to pass the ball and play with others nicely. It's the fundamentals that are so key that are going to take care of 80% of all of this. And what you've built is exactly what was necessary. It hadn't existed up until when you launched this. It's the right point for people to get started, to find out where they are in their path and how to navigate that correctly. And that's why we're so excited for that partnership. So I just want to thank you for creating that. And for those individuals who do want the level of care that we offer, we do offer free discovery calls. It's on our website. There's a button that says apply now. You click that, go through a little survey to see where you stand subjectively, and you can get on the phone with one of our brain health advisors to see if we need to give you an objective brain function test and a cognitive baseline and see where you are. So there's lots of great entry points for this that can get you pointed in the right direction without just walking in and shelling out $5,000 on a set of labs. And I think what you've created is beautiful. So thank you for this and for everything you've done previously to build up to this.
Awesome, dude. I'm really excited to be working together. I'm super excited about this decade and what we're going to do together, and the data that we're going to build, the case that we're going to build for this kind of care. And yeah, thanks so much for being part of it. This has been the Rogue Health Economist podcast. This has been episode 16. Go to mioshealth.com. That's MIOS health.com. You can take that free assessment. Tomorrow, we're going to be speaking to Joel Salatin, who is one of the best known regenerative agriculture farmers, and Sina McCulloch, who they have a new book coming out. And Sina has played the role of our health advocates for the last 10 years without even knowing what she was doing, because she reversed chronic illness. She knows that you need to be able to advocate for yourself. And so if you're watching this and you want to get started, you can go to findfunctional.com/start and get started for less than a copay and see what the appropriate intervention is to get you on the path to health. Our North Star is the most health for the least amount of cost. Super excited to be partnering with organizations that are doing it right, like Mios Health. Thanks so much for watching this episode, and we'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. See you then.